So welcome to Woodworking for Residential Camps. My name is Mike Schloff, founder of Maple Woodshop. Our mission is to teach all children life skills through woodworking. And we're honored to be joined by two experienced camp leaders, Rabbi Joel Seltzer, the executive director of Camp Ramah on the Poconos, and Mattherw Lifschultz, who's the summer camp director at Fairview Lake YMCA camp in New Jersey. Thank you both for joining us. I'd like to ask each of you if you could give us a little bit of your background and tell us about your camp and what makes it special. And we'll start with Rabbi Joel.
Well, thank you, Mike, and it's a pleasure to be a part of this with all of you today. So we are a organization, a not-for-profit organization that runs an overnight camp in the northeastern corner of Pennsylvania. We have a day camp in Philadelphia, and we are going to be celebrating the 70th year in the upcoming summer. So a wonderful place of Jewish camp, of Jewish educational experiences, and done in a typical residential overnight camp setting. So I've been the director now for 9 years of camp, and actually grew up there myself. So when I came back, I recognized that we didn't have a woodworking program at our camp. It had, been, I guess, eliminated at some point along the way due to space constraints and probably also due to, a challenge in finding the right staff in and out every summer. And we made it a plan of ours to really add this important program back into our camp experience. So that's where we began conversations with Mike and Maple Woodshops, which we'll talk about. But bringing what we call nagarut, the Hebrew word for woodworking, back into our camp programmatic offerings this year was really something we were very happy about.
Great, and thank you. And then Matt, tell us please a little bit about yourself and what makes Fairview Lake special.
Absolutely. So my name is Mattherw Lifschultz. I've been a long-time Fairview Lake camper and staff member, and as of last summer, took over the summer camp director role here. I'm a Springfield College graduate, so I was part of the YMCA Professional Studies program there, but I've spent every summer here at Fairview since I was 12 years old. What makes Fairview special is that we are nestled at the base of the Appalachian Mountains on a beautiful mile-long lake. And while that always is great, it's always about the relationships that we build and the people that come in and out of camp that really make camp special. But woodworking has been a wonderful addition to our programmatic offerings, and we really look forward to expanding on it and adding more opportunities for people to work with their hands.
That's great. That's great. And then while we're talking about that, what are some benefits of woodworking that you expected and maybe some that you didn't expect?
Yeah, so I think some things that we expected were that kids would leave the program with a sense of accomplishment. They would have a personal sense of actually completing something and then have that physical representation of it as well as a respect of tools and how to use them. I talked for about 30 minutes with a couple of my staff to kind of gather our thoughts before this, and they noticed that within moments of sawing through a piece of wood that the kids recognized how important of a skill it is and also how to respect those tools. It's just a great tactile project to engage children. It really allows kids to focus on one thing in particular and to see that progression as you actually build towards a final goal.
Yeah, that's so interesting. The respect for the tools, the process, the mental presence. Those are nice. And Rabbi Joel, how about for you? What are some benefits you're anticipating and maybe some that you didn't anticipate?
So, I mean, look, we were certainly looking to bring, woodworking back for all the reasons that probably everybody's on the webinar. It is a hands-on experience. It is something that relates to both genders and or many genders, I should say, and brings people in to that experience. But I'll also say for those boys to have a creative outlet, our boys and our maturing adolescent boys to really plug into something in our arts and crafts program with great meaning. That was, I think, a goal of ours, and we saw that come to fruition. What I would say was sort of the takeaway for us, from somewhat a surprising way, though it makes sense, is really just how much, the buzzword in education right now is, right, STEM education, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. You can throw in an arts there, right, for STEAM. And in many ways, right, this was a maker space. This is the thing that our kids are learning in terms of design. The number of careful images of the kid designing something with a number 2 pencil were great things to see long before they ever cut that piece of wood, right? So measure twice, cut once. And it was great to see those designs. And we'll talk a little bit about the curriculum and sort of where we went off script. But as an example, that a couple kids saw an Adirondack chair, a wooden Adirondack chair that our maintenance team built 15 years ago. It's been painted 6 times. They saw it and they brought it to the instructor and they're like, how do we make this? And the instructor said, well, start measuring piece by piece, right? And start listing what kind of pieces you would want me to cut. And now they built an Adirondack chair that's in our space. So I loved that engineering component that we really saw kids connect to.
That is really beautiful. And then the next question, and for those attendees, feel free to ask questions. We'll take those in short order. Each of your camps, to varying degrees, is focused on faith, and there's whether it's explicitly Jewish or whether there's just a lot of deep life values that you're trying to impart to your campers. And I'm wondering, going back to Matt, maybe to start, can you talk about how you found woodworking to be a vehicle to transmit the values that you're trying to develop in your campers?
Yeah, I think one of the values that we really wanted to focus on is actually like the focus and the patience of working on a project. But another thing that I wanted to kind of bring up as part of the benefits is that we just recently had a family workshop where they came together with I think it was just either mother, son, father, daughter, that picture there, and what the staff, so the 2 on the end, that's Andy and Stefan, the thing that they mentioned was the biggest part was the actual bonding that took place between these family members. They watched them work collaboratively on a common goal, and it was really beautiful to watch them work together in such harmony. And I think that was really a beautiful part of what kind of came out of the whole woodworking experience. But a lot of the things that we talked about before too, just that respect of camp equipment, of things that are going to help them build to something greater. And that's certainly that sense of accomplishment when you set a goal and work towards it.
Yep, that's beautiful. And then Rabbi Joel, can you tell us a little bit about how woodworking helped Ramah?
Yeah, I mean, I joked in a pre-call with Mike that, like, do I get to make the most famous Jewish carpenter in the world joke? So obviously woodworking goes a really far way back when it comes to the Judeo-Christian tradition, at least. And for us, I think everything that's been said by Matt and by you guys are thinking it rings true with us. What I would say that it's interesting for us is we use a lot of Hebrew at our camp, but Hebrew informs our values in a lot of ways. It's a really interesting language when you zoom in on the many meanings that are behind words. And so, for example, what do we call our activity period? We call it yitzirah. It's the Hebrew word for activity, but it's actually related to the verb that's used in the Bible for God's creative force, right? So it's not just creativity, but it's the force that creates our world. And so, with woodworking in particular, to take something, these scraps of wood, to work on them, as Matt said, to have the patience, to actually create something that then has purpose in the world, that's a pretty amazing skill, and that's a great example of the power that we want to teach our kids, that God gave us creative talents to make our worlds a more beautiful, a more functional place. And so I think there's a real life lesson there that starts with working with these tools and this equipment, but teaches a broader lesson about creativity, about teamwork, that picture of the girls all working together to measure that space and put that last assembly piece together. That's something that's going to repeat themselves, we hope, in a chemistry lab, 5 years from now for them, and beyond in their lives as well.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm just going to pop over to the chat. We might lose the screen. Okay, great. So, so next, thank you. It's heartwarming, right? I mean, this is why we're all involved with summer camps, and it's so nice to see. And there's multiple activities, let's be fair, that you can use to transmit the values you're trying to do at your camp. Now, on to practical matters. Let's talk about staffing. How did you each speak to a little bit, like, how did you find someone? What were the traits you were looking for? And, and how did it go? Because we're all learning as we go. So maybe we'll go back to Rabbi Joel again and tell us about your staffer and just how you go about staffing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I might speak for other camp directors on this call when I say something to the effect that there is often a challenge in running our camps. How do we bridge the gap between the loftiest ideals of our programming and our ability to staff that program? Who's out there in a given year? How long can we retain that perfect person? What happens when they rotate out? I'll say that one of the things that really attracted us to work with Maplewood Shops was the idea that every year the training is available, every year the curriculum is available, and we could, in theory, bring somebody up to speed very easily on running a great woodworking program that we've done year after year. And I want to say that that's in some ways, better than we can do in tennis, right? Or things like that we could, really hire somebody and give them the tools that they need through the training that comes with Maplewood. So that was an impetus behind us. Of course, we looked for somebody with great woodworking skills. For us, we sort of wanted somebody, we really start staffing around senior in high school, freshman in college age. And so we found, someone in that age who had done a lot of work in wood shops in high school. I would not call them professionally trained, and they received the Maplewood training. I did say to Mike, early on in the program, this young man, approached me and said, "How comfortable would you be with me going rogue?" Right? And I said, "Well, explain what going rogue means." Right? And he explains, if I go off book, if I go off the curriculum, this kid wants to do that, this kid wants to do that. And for me, first year of running a program, obviously just wanting the end result being kids participating in a really amazing creative experience, we said, yeah, go rogue, be safe. We do want the curriculum to develop where that's possible, but we ended up with bookshelves and foosball tables and Adirondack chairs, as I said. And so it went in a lot of different directions. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if that script replays itself over summers too. And some of that is generational, both the kids and the Gen Z staff member at this point who want to go a little off script. But I did say to Mike as well that it made me rethink, when we do it again this summer, how can we build in delivery methods so that the curriculum can be implemented? So in other words, we might want to think about what a double period would look like in woodworking if we feel like that 40-minute period by the time they get in there and out 3 times a week, except for the day that we cancel it because of the special program. If we feel like we can't deliver the curriculum, I want to think about how we can change the schedule so that we have the ability to do so. But look, I think it will always be a challenge in some ways to find staff on a year-to-year basis. But I trust the fact that we'll be able to train them up and then let them go rogue every once in a while too.
Rogue is nice. We like to say that 90% of the people we train don't have any woodworking experience. That they're good with kids, that they're crafty. But yeah, if you find someone who has woodworking experience, it's nice because you can you've got a platform on which you can do any variety of things. And Matt, what was your experience with staffing? You've trained a large number of people.
Yeah, I think at this point we've probably done 3 trainings with you, would be my guess. And the first training that we did was really focused on our year-round staff, and making sure that we had people for programs like our family camps that take place outside of the summer months, and just for women's wellness weekends, different variety times such as that. But then in the summer, we tried to look at people who we thought were going to be part of our program for a long time, wherever possible. We've probably retained about 60% of the staff that have been trained over year to year, and a couple of them have woodworking experience, and most of them probably don't. I think that the trainings that the Maple Wood Shop offers have been really good level for anybody to come into and learn, whether you have experience with tools or whether you don't. I think I did have one staff member that initially expressed interest and then kind of rescinded their interest because they were worried about working with tools. And I think if that's the case, I think it's better to respect that than to try to get them into that program. If they don't feel comfortable with that, then they're not going to be the right person to lead and be innovative and go rogue. I think that I haven't seen too much going rogue yet in our program, but I think we certainly can look at the capacity to do that. And I think we're definitely most interested in just adding new projects. And certainly the staff are too. They want to find new things that they can do. From what my staff said in talking to them, they felt like they had a really good overview of the tools going into teaching from the trainings too. So everybody that was trained felt really comfortable to go in and lead the program.
That's great. That's great. And then I just want to pause and look at see if there's any, okay, good. In terms of programming, there's, and we're talking about residential camps. Now each of you's, you've been around, maybe you could comment on how your programming, for residential kind of differed from day camp. Maybe there was extra time at the shoulders of the day or choice, but how did you weave it in, and how are you thinking of weaving it in next year? I'll pause there. There's a follow-on question, but maybe Rabbi Joel, how long were your periods? Let's skip down to brass tacks.
Yeah, so, as I sort of hinted at a moment ago, our periods typically are 50 minutes, but I don't know that fully adds in, the water bottle and hang up your raincoat, time. And we have we deliver sort of a 3-day-a-week programming choice and a 2-day-a-week programming choice. And so, I think what I was hinting at earlier was, I think if you chose that for 2 times a week and it's a 3.5-week session, that really only amounted to like 6 times. And I don't think that was enough for us to get that, curricular experience from start to finish. So again, then the question becomes, do you go off book for a shorter, kind of time with them, a little bit more creative open space, which again, free play, of course, has its values. But I think, looking at it this coming year, opting into a longer double period, trying to execute certain projects, selling those projects up front to the campers as, not just choosing woodworking, but if you choose this, you'll be with us for this number of time at this experience. And, you talked about sort of, shoulder moments of the day. I think we also, this was interesting too, that we really are camp based on camper choice, that almost all of the programming is campers choosing their activities, their options. However, what we sort of realized after the fact was, here we built this new woodworking program, but because of camper choice, not everybody chose it, which means they didn't get that experience this summer. What would it look like for our youngest campers, 3rd and 4th graders, to have a bunk activity experience, a one-off sort of, here you have, an hour in the wood shop with our instructor and your counselors, and now you're working on this project, and maybe it's twice a summer that your bunk comes together to do that. And that way we kind of give the experience to more kids as opposed to just relying on the choice piece. So all of, here's an addition to a new program, you add it, you fit it into, of course, your existing, schedule first and foremost. But like most things in our industry, when you add something, it makes you ask new questions about overall programmatic delivery and how we might tweak that moving forward. So I think it's causing us to ask a lot of questions about our daily schedule moving forward. Thanks, Mike.
Anytime. What's funny, this is very oblique, but in the mid 90s, in 95, one of my first jobs was helping companies make websites back in the mid 90s. And it was a similar thing where a website was like forced organizations to work together in very new ways because they'd never thought about how to represent themselves beyond maybe an annual report. And most companies didn't even do those. And it's funny. It feels the same because you have something that you want to do, but it begs more questions than you anticipated in healthy ways. And in ways that help you plan for the future, but it is kind of a funny intersection. And then actually just one follow on, Rabbi Joel, is Camp Ramah. How much do you do off season, like outside the summer?
So we do have some shoulder season retreats that we just really have begun to dip our toes into. But I was pre-call very interested in that family camp. Because, we haven't thought about how we could bring up a staff member, right, who's been trained to do an activity with a family camp that hasn't been sort of part of our thinking. I think we approach this as how do we add this program to our summertime experience? But obviously, once you have this kit and once you have somebody who's trained, to bring them up and to have that be a component of something, I was very excited, getting that idea today.
Everybody wins. Now, and Matt, I just want to say and give thanks. Fairview Lake, I believe, is the first camp that we outfitted back in 2017. Now we're up to 50 camps and schools in the United States and Australia, which is and growing. But so we're very grateful for early believers. Yeah. But maybe you could speak, like, how do you fit in woodworking during the summer and also around the year? I'm even curious about, how different ways you've used it. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so like Joel, we also are very much into that not free choice, but that the kids choose and do what it is that they want to do. That's, as somebody who's been a camper here at Fairview Lake, that was always my favorite thing. I would always make sure that I did archery every week. But now with Woodshop, these kids are picking and choosing to do what they want to do, what they're interested in. And I certainly am now thinking about what Joel said, is that how do we get everybody to participate in it, even if it's not something that they necessarily chose, because the exposure is really important. And all of those things that we talked about before, those benefits, how do we share those with every camper that comes in? But programmatically, they're picking and choosing what it is they want to do, so they are going to be in that program because they want to do it, which I think is a beautiful part of camp. Scheduling the program was pretty simple. We are generally about an hour-long program, and we would have 5 program periods per week. In our 3-week program, we rotate on a weekly basis, so a kid could potentially do it for 15 days in a session. If they were to sign up for it, they could certainly have a lot of time to build and see that progression or to refine their projects, which I think would really be great. We also recognize that projects could certainly be altered based on time to, again, make them more detailed or less if need be. And that it's a program that kids kept wanting to go back to. So in our adventure camp, ETC was what we call it, Environmental Trips for Challenge. They found that they would start projects and that the kids would ask to keep going back and doing that. So they certainly really loved it. As far as class size, one of the biggest class sizes that we had at one time was about 17 kids. But what I'd say is that not all of them were working on tables at that time. Some of them would rotate between either wood burning or painting. So there's a lot of enhancements that you can do to make each of these projects that much more special. And then as far as kind of our weekends, we were just really intentional about making sure that that program was built around woodworking, so that we made that intentional time to collaboratively work with your parent or your child to make a special moment. But we also supplemented that program with other camp magic as well, like campfires and archery and other things too, so that it wasn't just based around that, but around bonding and coming together and sharing in a moment in a beautiful space.
Yep, that's really nice. Now, just for perspective, so I live in Maplewood, and both my kids went to Fairview Lake, and I see a lot of kids who go to that camp, and they come back here, and sometimes we do local events, and kids are doing woodworking. They're like, "Oh, I know this. I do this at camp. Like, let me tell you something." And I'm like, "Oh, which camp?" "Oh, Fairview Lake." And I say, "Oh, great. I'm familiar with that." Yes. But it's nice because they really do bring it home. Now we've had experiences where kids come back to a school district, and it even enticed the school district to bring it to their school, which was stunning. But they definitely, there's a beautiful learning curve because they learn the safety. The safety is uniform across all the programs. The tools are uniform. The methods are uniform. And so it's really nice to see kids get adept. And, I'm just going to skip to a slide where we talk about different projects each year, so that as kids come back, we're trying to give different experiences for different types of programming that vary year over year, so that a child, even if the person is sticking to the book, if the lesson plans that are programmed, there's enough variety for different programming needs. We even have one camp where they're doing 30 hours of woodworking per child. It's like, it is the camp basically for a week. And they burn through most of our lesson plans in one summer, which is pretty interesting. But, just that range of early exposure for everybody, all the way up to, as kids age, giving them more agency and choice, and even to the extent of specialty camps where there's some kids that's their groove. That's where they feel themselves and they can express themselves and explore identity. And it's their medium of choice. So it's always fascinating to see how different people do it. Here we have a question. Let's see. So one question, how much time do you spend on training pre-camp, and what tools do you typically train counselors on? So the time that we spend it's about 8 hours of training all in. And it's divided into 3 phases. The first phase is watching videos. We believe in the blended learning approach. We work with expert online training to host training videos so that staff can be trained before they get to camp, because we appreciate there's that crunch time of 2 weeks before camp starts. And so by the time they step foot on campus, they are familiar with the program. Then we work together on some projects so that they can get familiar with the tools. And the tools include things like Japanese pull saws that you can see hanging in the cabinet, which are very effective. They can even cut 2x4s, coping saws, block planes, screwdrivers, hammers, etc. And then we work together for about a half day. And then we ask that the camps give the counselors some extra time, and we even leave them some wood so that they can build the projects they're planning on building with the kids. And it's really nice for the kids, as we discussed in this webinar, it's nice to merchandise the program by showing the projects that people could build at the beginning of the summer. Because, human nature says, "Ooh, I like that. I want to build one of those." And so that's our intent with the training. And so I wanted to ask one more question as we kind of wind down here, which are, being candid, what are some of the hurdles that you faced, and how did you overcome them? Maybe Matt, do you want to start?
Yeah. So I think one of it's kind of simple, but just keeping wood in stock, having enough wood available, ready to go, almost requires like a daily, not a daily check-in, but a regular check-in from a supervisor, somebody that's going to recognize it. Not all camp counselors or first-time staff members going to recognize to report when supplies are low. So there were certainly some times where we would go into the woodworking class and all I see people using are scraps. And while it's great to utilize every piece, I think that just keeping a good stock of wood was a little bit of a challenge. And then also then making the most of scraps can always be a challenge. You want to try to be as zero waste as possible, trying to utilize what we can. Let's see, yeah, just not, so kids would want to do certain projects and we wouldn't have the right amount of wood to be prepared for that. And then also some of the workstations do require repairs every once in a while, but they're very manageable. It's usually just a matter of tightening things, making sure that they're in good working order. Nothing that my staff had any really big concerns about. The workstations seem to be really good and user-friendly for repairs. But making sure that you, before you actually run that program, that you have gone and checked in with your supplies and your equipment to make sure that it is in that good working order so that you can then run your program effectively without having to, in the middle of a program, do repairs. But, I mean, those are very surmountable things that we have overcome.
Sure, that's great. And, to that end, we now have spreadsheets to help estimate material use. You can even give to a lumber yard. If you think about the summer and the programming, it'll tell you literally how many feet of wood you need and the cut list that you could give to the lumber yard or your, support staff, and they could prep all the wood.
Awesome.
So that's something that that might be very helpful. But the scrapitecture is something we love. It's where once kids know how to use the tools and the techniques, it's really fun to let them, as Joel was saying, kind of go rogue, and express what they want to do. So that's really good feedback. Thank you. And Rabbi Joel, what hurdles did you face and overcome?
Well, I mean, look, I think I'm sure some people on the call are thinking about, is this the direction I want to go in if I'm starting a woodworking program? Is this the cost that, is bearable up front? From our perspective, what we really felt was a great advantage to partnering with Maple Wood Shops was the idea that the investment was up front, but the training comes with it and is part of the support process. And I want to give credit to Mike and his team for being in touch with us like regularly throughout the course of the summer on this issue or that issue or a little repair thing, that got sent our way. So very great sort of customer service and that support. And for us, it was incredibly worth it to make that investment. I think things we learned along the way, one thing is wood storage. That we built this new building for the wood shop. We built the tables for it, to specs, but we didn't necessarily think about where are we going to store the wood in that space. And so actually you can even see in the background of that, like we had to build shelving into the wall, which by the way turned into a really great project for our staff member who liked to go rogue on things. So we had to build in some shelf. We had to build in some bin shelving, where you could sort of put 2x4s vertically so that they could sit in that space and then be brought out. And one thing I was mentioning to Mike that you may have noticed in a couple of these pictures too is like, but where are those safety goggles, right? And
yeah.
in every shot, or there is a kid, eating a lollipop in the scene. And I do think that, we talked about what a sort of checklist manifesto might look like and how do we make that part of the beginning of every lesson. And that's, the staff training component too. Yes, it's about the training that Maplewood receives, but then how do we as camps continue to supervise, make sure that that it's being implemented the way that we feel is most safe. I will also say that it is safe. And, we have not experienced any of those, God forbid, anything significant. And look, that, one of the things is this is hand tool, right? Assembly. And I think that made us feel good about making this investment too, that it wasn't about picking, half a dozen different kinds of bandsaws and jigsaws. And of course, then the safety concerns that come with that or who operates them, the instructor or the kid. This was incredibly hands-on and as safe as it could be.
that's good. You know, it's interesting, right? Like we want people to be mindful, and the safety, rules include a lot of thinking. Like the third rule is that we literally say something will go wrong. How you deal with it is what matters. And I think that's really important in this digital age that, kids and adults, we put so much pressure on ourselves. The Instagram era, there's so many expectations around living this pixel perfect life, and it's just false, right? So to go to an organic material that moves, that swells, that shrinks, that cracks, that has knots, it's a nice, it brings us back. It's a touchstone, if you will, to something very basic, very powerful. And the working together is another powerful thing that you touched on. I'm grateful that you mentioned that, whether it's intergenerational or working, as teams. That our fourth rule even says we're a community, help others and ask for help. So whether you have the child who, it's their moment to shine and they're the early finisher, we encourage deputizing that child to help, help his or her peers. And then for the child who might be too afraid to ask, that you're worthy, definitely reach out. This is a place where you matter. And I think that's something that's universal for camps. So those checklists actually exist. And it's just, let's, try and use them. They're the rules that we wrote, the safety checklists, have been adopted by the American Camp Association. And so if you're a member of the ACA, you can download them for free, and and have at them. You don't need our program. We want, we think woodworking in general is beautiful. And so whether you use maple wood shop or not, always be safe. But we do like the hand tool aspect, as some of you mentioned, because it does give that agency, right? Where the kids don't have to hand it off for the fun bits to the counselor. And even if they struggle, that's good too. The struggle is part of the journey. So we definitely encourage that. So, with that, I just want to ask each of you any parting thoughts, advice you'd have for other camp directors now that if you kind of meditate on what we discussed in the last half hour. And maybe Matt, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so the things that I kind of wrote down to pass on were that it's important to have at least 3 or 4 reliable staff that you can depend on to at any point go and be a leader. Some of the people that we wound up having trained were leaders of other programs like that adventure trip program. So he was really focused on helping those kids. Another one was our boys unit leader. So these people have really important roles sometimes, and they can't always be pulled away to lead a woodshop class. So we, this year, made a point of training some general counselors that would be good leaders in their respective units to be helpful. I think though the program itself is mobile, it's definitely beneficial, like Rabbi Joel has, to have a dedicated space to work out of. And then if you really, and to store the wood, excuse me, but if you really need to, it does have that awesome functionality where you can bring it to a different space for a different group. And then really the final thing was that you need to have really good solid tables to work on. We've certainly tried on cheap plastic tables, but you really want something that's kind of heavy and solid to work on. So just some things to consider when you're preparing and getting ready for to bring this program to your camp.
Those are good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, you guys maybe even provided the specs for the wooden tables that I think our maintenance team built.
We can.
Yeah. So the tables in that picture, we just had once the construction project was done and it was empty floor space, we had our maintenance team build those tables to spec, and for just really wood, and of course your fixed costs of maintenance anyway. So that kept it really solid. Actually this screen is a great point. The optional assistant parts is stuff that I think we would think more about in the future too. Not that I think you need it in every class, but if there are a lot of kids and they're all working, and if they are younger, I think, this coming summer, we might think about what a deputy would look like, to Mike's point, and sort of an extra sort of training person. And maybe I like that idea of the staff members that are, really cabin counselors too, some of them getting some optional training in this so that if and when their bunk does go through, they're not just participants, but they have a little bit of the technique to add as well. So that sort of supervision thing is something that if it is, 14 kids, 12 kids, in a space, sometimes an extra eye or two on those kids, I think is pretty important. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for your thoughts and your experience. Thank you to all the attendees for spending the time with us, and happy woodworking. We hope you get the chance to give your campers powerful life skills in a variety of ways, including woodworking. So happy 2020, and thanks for joining us.
We do have one more question in the chat that you want to answer.
Oh, the upfront cost. So, we have for 16 kids up front, it's about $15,000, but we have some financing plans available as well. We appreciate it's a pretty big upfront cost. So we have some ACA discounts and we have some financing plans, happy to discuss offline. And yeah.
But Mike, I just want to be the voice too of, like, for us, we were looking at the economics of it last year, of course, but if you really weigh that against, what kind of equipment do you need to purchase? What's the dust collection system on that, on those equipment that you need to have? It starts to add up, and then there's the added issue of who's trained for those things as opposed to this kit that then comes with the training piece as well. And of course that training continues, beyond just the kit, which is obviously the biggest upfront cost. But important to know that was part of our calculations too, and we found it to be very valuable.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. It is like, if you think about outfitting a shop, it's a rounding error. It's less than the overage you'd have from your contractor. So, yep, there's that. And then, just by the way, we do have a promotion, half off shipping until January 31st. So if you're interested, please give us a call. You can go on our website, maplewoodshop.com. And I just want to end with, if you want to learn more, please check out these two wonderful organizations. And I think all of us will be at ACA Tri-State. And, and yeah, hope to see all of you at one of these shows.
We'll be hanging out at the Maplewood Shop.
Very good. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take care. Happy holidays.